Yo, what is going on, guys? Godrekton here today, bringing you a new video. In this video, however, it is not your normal type of video. It's not really a guide. It's not even really a commentary or anything like that, but it's just a discussion video. Now, in these discussion videos that I do want to do sometimes, I don't really know what to call it, so I don't have a series name or anything like that at the moment, but just keep it as like a topical video where I'll be explaining over something that I find is very important, that I want to spread knowledge on. And within this type of video, to start off this little series or whatever, I don't know yet, is that I want to talk about the topical debate between Press the Attack and Conqueror as Keystone runes for Renekton. This has been an age-old question since Season 8 when Press the Attack was first introduced, followed by Conqueror within the season, where people always debate between the two runes on which is better for Renekton. Now, just to quickly say it and disclaim the video, there is really no wrong choice here, guys. It is all down to playstyle. So if you want a quick understanding of like when you should go this rune and that rune, I will try my best to explain it for the video, but you can really just rock one rune for your entire playstyle if you want to. Each rune has its own pros and it has its own cons too, so you should keep that into account that you can switch up each rune depending on the matchups and depending on the playstyles that you're going to be playing. But I will just say that it is overall just down to your own playstyle. But now that we have covered this, it is now time to talk about why you would take these runes on Renekton. So if you don't know how these keystones work, and you're new to Renekton, essentially Press the Attack is really good on Renekton to begin with, because essentially it enhances his trading ability, his trading identity within the champion, where you're able to do quick combos to get in and out. You proc it from your free hit activation, which will then give you exposure damage upon proccing, which will then enhance your whole damage for a certain amount of time, which will increase until the end of combat. Now, the reason this is so good on Renekton in the first place is because Renekton can quickly proc the on-hit activation with his W, which can entirely be procced from a single empowered W, and upon proccing the rune, you'll be dealing from 40 to 160 bonus exposure damage, which scales off depending on your adaptive force, and because Renekton is AD primarily, that's how his damage source will be utilized. And the rune will also increase your damage up to 8%, which will maintain for the whole fight until you exit. Another little caveat to this rune too is the fact that you can re-proc the exposure damage on the free hit passive while also in combat, which is also increased on top of the 8%, so you actually gain a little bit extra damage for the longer you're staying in a fight. The cooldown on the rune too is also 6 seconds on top of that after applying the free hit passive to begin with. So overall so far, Press the Attack remains a really strong rune for Renekton in this regard. When it comes to typical combos, like I already talked about in the animation cancel video, you do have combos like the Q animation cancel combo, which can give you a really fluid combo, which is really great into champions like Darius. Any champion where you want to be very in and out to apply damage and get out safely. This will remain a really godlike rune for that playstyle. So typically if you E in, Q auto attack, followed by an empowered W, then auto E, you're applying so much damage in the first place that nobody can even match you, which is then followed by a disengage, which then can allow you to keep all your health up and also instantly win you a fight or even one-shot your target of choice. All in all, this combo and training pattern is completely disgusting, and it also remains a really strong choice on why you'd want to take it on Renekton. Another little detail too, just to quickly talk about more about the rune, is because you also have 8% increased damage, this also increases over to your items and your other runes that you have. Things like Last Stand, Cut Down, Blair Ruin King, Sojin, you name it, anything with damage modifiers or additional damage that you have, like your ultimate dot damage, or even like a Leandri, something silly like that. All your damage is being increased on top of the rune, which is why it also makes it a very flexible and a very adaptable rune when it comes to various different builds on Renekton. Now that we talked about Press the Attack though, it's now time to talk about Conqueror. Conqueror is a little bit different with how you want to play it, because essentially the way it works is that you have to stack your Conqueror up to 12 stacks. Each stack is also counted as 2 for melee champions, so Renekton, like the Press the Attack rune, can quickly proc the stacks completely off his auto attacks. Because his W also counts as an on-hit modifier off each hit, potentially you're getting up to 6 stacks alone for your empowered W, which then can quickly increase your stacks, and then followed by any abilities too, which also grant 2. You can quickly stack up an entire combo with just auto attack W, auto Q. The way Conqueror also works too, if you don't know how that really interacts with Renekton, is that you're gaining from 1.0 AD up towards 2.4 by level 18, and this is carried by each stack that you're getting from Conqueror. So potentially you are getting up to 12.96 flat AD, or 13 in shorter words, or 28.8 or 30 AD when you're level 18. Now the AD later on in the game doesn't really matter so much, however, but it is more of an early to mid game rune where you do want to be stat checking your opponents. There are various matchups where Renekton can struggle into, like tank matchups, or even matchups where you can win the fights longer, however you might lose, like depending on champions like Shen or anyone that has like percentage damage, like an Ornn, something of that nature. The rune then allows you to carry over the damage, which lets you play off Q, which you can grant an even bigger heal, as the rune also gives you 8% post-mitigation damage healing. So essentially, over time, you will be healing as you're fighting, which makes it a really strong stat-checking rune. Into certain matchups too, I think that going Conqueror into things like Jax or even Gangplank, matchups where they will be winning over time later on in the game, however, early game, their strengths are definitely stifled for the fact you have more AD. It grants even harder stat checking ability, which you essentially need to dominate your matchups early, which grants you a bigger safety net compared to press the attack, where it's a lot harder to use the rune and also self-sustain in the fights long enough to fully apply the damage that you need to win against your matchups. So overall, it can be very good for that based on feel. Another thing to also note is that your stacks last up to 5 seconds as well. So depending on whenever you exit combat, you can essentially stay in combat through the whole time of using this rune. However, as soon as you stop attacking for 5 seconds, that is when your stacks will deplete and you'll go back to 0. There is also no cooldown on the rune on top of that as well. So no matter if you do lose the stacks, you can instantly get back into the fights compared to a press the attack. However, it's not really the biggest deal, as either way now with how the press the attack rune functions, is that even if it drops off, the rune will still come back online a lot quicker than it used to. So with that being said, that is really the main differences of how Press the Attack and Conqueror mainly work for Renekton. Now, this is where it becomes a little bit hazy, as everybody has a different opinion, but essentially, the way to kind of choose between when you want Press the Attack and Conqueror is essentially based on your overall feel for the champion, and even just your champion mastery as a whole. And by that, I just mean that the more experience and knowledge that you have, you'll be able to determine when you find that it's the most applicable compared to when it isn't. But if you want like a quick boundary or guideline when to take these things, I would say take Press the Attack into matchups that you will lose in longer trades, but in matchups where shorter trades will benefit you, where you can kill your opponents in 2 to 3 combos, maybe range matchups or matchups that consist of fighter champions where you can quickly one-shot and win off fights off your ability to quickly proc your damage earlier on into disengaging. So things such as Yone, Yasuo, Riven, Irelia, these champions of this nature, this rune, Press the Attack can be really good for that, while also being really good into bruiser matchups such as Set, Darius, Kled, and essentially just things like this. Now Conqueror, again, I think that is good into champions where you can do slightly longer fights early game with a Doran's Blade, or even just like your first item components where you're just going to be stat checking, playing off your Q heal and AD ability that you're gaining. So things into tank matchups like Shen, Ornn, Malphite, potentially matchups like Urgot too, so champions where the enemies will have damage in the beginning of the combos but fall off, so like an Urgot, as I already mentioned, Gragas, Warwick. These are basically the matchups where you can take Conqueror. Now again, it depends on people and how they want to play, but that doesn't also mean you can't take the opposite rune into these matchups. Like, for example, Aatrox is a matchup where both runes are essentially good because you want to be in and out of your combos. You don't want to stay too long to the point where Aatrox will get all his damage off, hit his Qs more consistently and get his passive up more frequently to the point where you're losing. However, Conqueror does also meet a great standard into those level 6 fights where once you go in and get all your stacks up from your AD, you're essentially stat checking Aatrox on top of healing through all of his damage, and you end up being the stronger champion. Same thing with the Garen matchup too. Garen also operates in a similar way. However, you're basically waiting until Garen makes the trades first to fire back onto him. But that's where Conqueror can be good to quickly Q onto him to apply that damage instantly from the additional AD. Then followed by your level 6 fights where you're building the stacks and ulting, going in on them. Press the Attack can also be good in the way that you want to start your fight with auto W if he has no W. Try to do a quick trade in and out. Like, really, it doesn't really matter. It just depends on how you're playing as a player and what you're overall looking towards in the game. Now within this video, I did also mention that playstyles can impact the runes, and by that I also mean that if you're going like a full damage like AD playstyle, Press the Attack is infinitely better than Conqueror. Press the Attack is simply so good with full damage playstyles is because the damage is basically instantaneous on the fact that you have to stack your rune way less as it's a free hit passive. You can also use so many autos in between your combos to squeeze out so much more damage, which will then overtake the damage compared to Conqueror in AD builds. The fact that you have that damage basically instantly too within the mid to late game allows you to go for many flash players on a full AD playstyle where you'll quickly one-shot your target before you can even stack your Conqueror, which will then also give you the difference in between being able to one-shot someone compared to when you can't with a Conqueror, for instance. But if we juxtapose the playstyles that we have, Conqueror is definitely really good for Bruiser because of the fact that you will be in fights a lot longer and you'll also be able to tank up damage within the fights as well. So if you consider that you have a Bruiser build with Sterix or lots of health or other tank items, having the Conqueror on top of the 8% healing that you're gaining means that you can stay in the fights longer, apply more damage, and be more of a raid boss slash stat checker a lot more effectively than having to press the attack. So if we really just think about that as by concept, it is really depending on what your intentions are. Are you playing to one shot? Are you playing for a hard carry play style where you're assassinating people off the map? Press the Attack by all means is a lot better for that. Now if we're playing for the mid to late game where we know our builds are going to spike up and be a lot more greater in being able to play in a way where we're going to be able to tank more damage, be a lot harder to kill, and have way more sustained damage throughout the whole fight on top of multiple targets. And Conqueror is certainly going to be a lot better for that playstyle. Now, something that I do also want to touch over, as I've just remembered as I'm making this video, is that Press the Attack is no longer bound to a single target once applied. Before, it used to be a very single target based rune, but now the way they've changed it is that once you do apply onto one target, you carry over that 8% damage onto every other target that you're playing against. So when it comes to sustained damage, it actually works on multiple people. But it's the fact that you do have to auto-attack someone 3 times to reproc the exposure damage and also keep that up within the fights. So that is an extra little caveat to why Press the Attack can be good as well when it comes into the mid to late game portion, and it's not just Conqueror dominated from there. However, with the given playstyle that you have, Conqueror is definitely making you way more tanky and also giving you a better way to apply your damage within those stages of the game. So with that being said though, these are really the main pros and cons of the runes. There's not really much else to really talk about in this video because the subject is so depleted already. It's already been talked about in so many times, but there's not really a big video on it. But essentially, the way I'm going to end this video is that this rune is basically down to your own preference. Play both runes, play all these playstyles, play everything that you can and soak it in like a sponge. Because the more knowledge that you have for yourself, it's only going to greaten your champion mastery, it's only going to greaten your understanding of how Renekton works and how good he can be into many different scenarios of the game. And that's essentially the beauty of playing Renekton, because you can't really ever get bored of this champion. There's so many ways you can play him, there's so many little things you can do that are different from game to game, and that's what constantly elevates the gameplay for Renekton and why his overall skill ceiling is so high. The depth of this champion is so astronomically high, so you can essentially craft your own playstyle and craft your own way of simply playing him, that any playstyle is practically down to their own users' overall success on what they're doing and what they're also playing towards. Another thing that will also lead into, which can be very helpful for the video and very helpful for you guys, is that on the screen right now, I will have a matchup tier list here of the matchups I would like to take Press the Attack into, the matchups I take Conqueror into, and overall this is like my guidance in what I would take the runes into, because overall I do like to play my runes for the matchup more so. However, some people might also disagree and they might want to go another rune instead. And ultimately, that is your choice at the end of the day, but this is like my own guideline if you are curious. With that being said though, guys, that is essentially my discussion video on what I think about the runes and what other people also do, as this is not just a sole effort from myself, but it's also just talking from many other high-elo Renekton players. And everybody has their own opinion. Some people straight up hate Conqueror, but some love Conqueror or just like hate Press the Attack. It's really just like whatever you prefer, guys, at the end of the day. So hopefully that spreads some light upon the topic, and if anyone ever asks this question, please link them this video. I feel like we talked over a good amount about when the runes are good, so that should hopefully solve the age-old crisis of when to go these runes and kind of put that to bed. So with that all being said, guys, thank you very much for watching the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully that you learned something different from watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave it in the comments below what kind of other videos that you want for the future. Any other like debates that you want me to go over between item builds or playstyles, I'll be happy to explore that and also explain it to you guys as a community. But thank you very much for watching though, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you again for also hitting 8,000 subs recently. So thank you very much again for the bottom of my heart for supporting me along this journey of making these videos and pushing me into being the best content creator that I can be. But with that said though, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. So peace out and have a good one.